Hello, friends, and welcome to a very special edition of Nostalgia Talk. I'm James, that is my name, but you guys already know that. And the reason that this is such a special episode is because this is episode number 50. Holy crap, that feels weird saying that. 50 shows in the last 2 years. I started this as a pandemic project because I was doing this from home while I was still in college, kind of doing online school because of the pandemic, and started out with 10 guests in 2 months, and now here we are, episode number 50. I honestly can't believe that. 2 years running and doing this. Wow. So a big thank you to all of you listeners for continuing to tune in every show and continuing to listen. Hopefully you've learned a lot, and a big thank you to the 50 plus guests that have come on. The reason I say 50 plus is, of course, as you guys know, we did a Lazytown reunion, and that was more than one person. And joining me for the 50th episode is a very talented human being, a Sesame Street legend. There's that word legend again. She has been a puppeteer, actress, voice actress, just anything that this person does. She's just really, really good at it. Let's give a big welcome to the one and only Fran Brill.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now, for anyone not aware, as I said, Fran is a puppeteer, actress, and voice actress with many credits to her name. Mostly well-known for, of course, Sesame Street as Prairie Dawn, Zoe, Littlebird, Roxie Marie, Mrs. Crustworthy, Wanda Cousteau, Betty Lou, Elmo's mom, May, and Polly Darton. I almost said Dolly Parton. That's really, really, hard. That's really easy to mix
close.
up. Yeah. You're just switching up the initials.
I do that myself. I have to think. What's the wrong way? I need to do it the wrong way.
And in addition to Sesame Street, has also been on The Muppet Show, The Jim Henson Hour, Saturday Night Live, the movies Midnight Rain and What About Bob, and has done a lot of Midnight Run. Sorry, I can't believe I screwed that up.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
Midnight Rain sounds like a good movie, but I wasn't in it.
Yeah. Is that even the name? Is that even a real film?
Midnight Rain?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there is, but that wasn't the one I was in. I was in Midnight Run.
Well, I aspire to be a screenwriter. Maybe I could write Midnight Rain and hope to not get sued.
Why not?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And has also been in Sheep in the Big City, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Doug, all of which were cartoons, where she has done voiceover work. And honestly, this is really an incredible thing because Fran was one of the original 6 Sesame Street Muppet performers, meaning with Jim Henson, Frank Oz, Carol Spinney, Jerry Nelson, and Richard Hunt. Her and all of them were there for the first 3 years ongoing. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks so much. I think you know more than I do about what I've done.
Yeah, I think you did attest to that one time. You had said to me, "Oh my God, you know way too much."
I know. Well, you did your homework.
That's
which is very nice. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. So let's get right into it. You started out as an actress before going in as a puppeteer. What inspired you? What were some of your biggest inspirations?
As an actress?
Yeah.
Or a puppeteer. Oh, wow. Well, I do remember that Barbra Streisand had just become famous with that album, People. I mean, I'm saying this, that's the first person that popped into my head because I was doing summer stock in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and she had just released the People album. And my memory of that whole summer when I was kind of an apprentice and, I was painting stuff and doing all the apprentice work, but I was in scenes that required young women, whatever small part they had, I would play that at Bucks County Playhouse. And I just remember listening to that album the entire summer over and over and over and over again. I mean, I wasn't like this enormous fan, but it was the album, I think, that really put me through the roof. It's just a fabulous album. But I met some interesting people because, let's see, at that same summer of summer stock, they did a pre-Broadway tryout with Alan Alda. And I don't know if you all listening will know all these names, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. So Alan Alda was in it, and geez, I can't remember who else. but one of my jobs was to stand backstage in what was the supposed closet off the living room and hand Alan Alda this umbrella without being seen. In other words, it was a prop. You know that word, prop? Yep. I mean, that's what you call stage stuff.
Yeah, I handled props a little bit on the show that I work on. I was the assistant prop handler for a week.
Great. Well, in case anybody out there listening, those are the objects that actors need, be it a glass of water or a hat, and in this case, an umbrella. And so that was one of my jobs. And then I was also in a play with Tyne Daly. I don't know if you know that name, but she comes from a very famous acting family. So I got to know her, and who else was there? Well, Robert Redford and Elizabeth Ashley had just been there, but I missed them. I guess I got there maybe a few weeks later, and they were doing a pre-Broadway tryout of Barefoot in the Park, the Neil Simon play.
Oh, cool.
So that was my first real taste. I think I was 16, actually. 16 going on 17.
I am 16 going on 17.
Yes, exactly.
I couldn't resist.
Yeah, I almost did it myself, but I didn't. So that was really my first, other than doing summer stock when I was 15, that was sort of the most exciting, pre my being an independent actress, not just an apprentice. I have wandered so far from your question. I have no idea what you asked me.
I think we covered it. I was wondering what inspired you to want to get into acting, like earliest influences.
That was when I was a brownie. I don't know if you have those in Nova Scotia. It's like Cub Scouts. It's the equivalent. It's Girl Scouts are older girls, but brownies are probably 6, 7 years old, maybe that's too young. Around that age, elementary school for sure. And what really got me going was that I was in a play, and most of the brownies they're all girls, of course, were cast as older girls, teenagers, and they gave me the part of the great Aunt Ella. And I'm here. I am 7-year-old in a long skirt and a gray wig on my head, and it's probably because I was so young and playing this woman so much older, but I got a lot of laughs, and the sound of that laughter and the approbation, that you get when you're on stage, that did it for me, and I was hooked. That was it. That was the start of many years of summer stock and doing community theater, and then majoring in drama at Boston University Fine Arts School. And so I knew very early on that was what I was going to do with my life.
That's really, really cool.
Yes, I think it was easier. A lot of people get to be 18, 19, 20, and they still are not sure what they want to be or do with their life. And of course that can change, but it was easy for me. That was it. I said, that's it to my parents. I want to be an actress. And they kind of went, hubba, hubba, what? They didn't know where that came from because nobody in the family had been a performer. But so I knew early, to answer your question.
Now, before coming into Sesame Street, did you do TV shows like appearing on screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the chronology right. It's funny, somebody just sent me an absolutely ancient commercial that I did, and I must have just come to New York. I don't even remember shooting this commercial. It was for Sure deodorant. And I was a lady running for office. And I mean, I absolutely looked at this and went, I have no memory of this. It was really weird. So what happened is that when I got to New York, it was in a Broadway show because I had my first job out of college was at Theater Atlanta. And I was a journeyman. It's how I got my equity card, which is the union card. And again, I got paid a pittance, but it was, at least I could pay for my apartment. I think it was $75 a week. And again, would appear in as an extra or just small parts, but we also worked the theater and, did props and that sort of thing. But at least when they offered me the job, they said, and you'll get your union card. And that was great, because how can I be in a professional play if I don't have my union card? Well, you can't get your union, you can't audition for stuff unless you have your union card. So it's a big, conundrum there. And when they said I would get my actor's equity card, I went, yes, okay, I'm going to do this. And then we did this show called Red, White, and Maddox, which was written by local people. And that show got reviewed by a lot of press, and producers came from New York. And what it was a musical satire about the present, the then president. I'm sorry, the guy who was governor of of Georgia at that time was a guy called Lester Maddox. Mm-hmm. And so this was and he was very bigoted, and he had a restaurant on the side called the Pickwick, and he wouldn't allow African Americans into the restaurant. So these two, kind of heavy. So these guys wrote this musical satire about this ridiculous man, and it got a lot of attention. And then a producer said, I'm going to move everybody who's in it to New York. And, we opened, unfortunately, in a blizzard, and we ran for 41 performances. And then here I was in New York, and having to, find an apartment and all of this stuff. And it put me in New York as a young actress much sooner than I had intended. My plan, what is the old John Lennon line, God, your plans are only to be broken. But anyway, I digress. So my intention was that I would do regional theater, and then I would, have a nice bunch of credits on a resume, and then I could go around looking for an agent when I got to New York. So this didn't happen at all. Here I was right out of college and on Broadway, which was very exciting. But the show closed, as I said, after 41 performances. And then I had to find an apartment. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend knew a girl who was looking for a roommate. So I moved in with her. And then I started pounding the pavements. But at the end of the day, I would turn on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, because he just made me feel good about myself. And then I watched the first season of this new children's television show called Sesame Street. And I was watching it and I thought, wow, always thinking, because you have to earn money. Maybe they need somebody to do voices for something on the show. There was a lot of animation on the show at that time. And I had no idea how the puppets worked, but I just assumed somebody was doing the lines and somebody else was wiggling the puppets,
Yeah, I still get asked that all the time. Like,
don't you?
Yeah, like,
it's of course not.
Yeah, like I remember hearing one of the writers saying that when he first started watching the show, it was John Weidman who was saying this in an interview. He was saying when he started watching it with his kids, he would notice the puppeteering and he would think, okay, somebody's doing the puppeteering for a Cookie Monster one day, another person's doing the same thing the next day, and then he actually goes to the set and it's like, oh wow, they're doing the whole 9 yards.
Right. Yeah, it's really a one-person job, but it's the other thing. I still get asked about the voices I did. They don't realize it's not a voiceover job. It was a puppeteering job, which is a heck of a lot harder than just
very physical. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's multitasking if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it. I've had my rotator cuff surgery operated on recently, so I'll do it with my
Ouch.
left hand. Yeah, ouch. It's a miserable recovery, but I'm coming along.
That's good.
So yeah, you've got to keep your hand up in the air, keep the eyes focused. You've got to keep the puppet alive. You've got to do the voice, whatever voice you're doing. It's a lot to think about, but anyway, so okay, so I was, and then I got going with voiceovers because I would go into an agent's office, and one of the first things they'd say is, "You've got a quirky voice," and so they would send me out for voiceovers, and I did really well with that. You know
Mm-hmm.
what a voiceover is? I mean,
Oh
does
yeah,
anyone
yep.
know?
Yeah,
Okay,
I've interviewed a ton of voiceover artists. Like I've
okay.
interviewed the voice of Donald Duck. I've interviewed Tweety.
Wow, good for you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so they know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did get cast in got cast in this musical called Little Mary Sunshine. And from that, agents who saw it started sending me out as an actress. So I got my footing, I would say, fairly soon. Uh, but really early on is when I was sitting in an agent's office, and they said, "Hey, Fran, you might be interested in this. Jim Henson is having a auditions for a workshop for this Ed Sullivan Christmas special." Do you know what that was?
Was it the Great Santa Claus Switch?
Yes, with Art Carney. I wish you had known all these people, but you're too young. Art Carney was on the Jackie Gleason show.
The
Did you know that?
Honeymooners, yeah.
Yeah, the Honeymooners. Okay.
Yeah, another good friend of this podcast is actually Lou Berger, and
Oh
he,
yeah,
yeah,
Lou. Yeah.
and he created the character of the Grand High Triangle Lover and his assistant, which the voices were very much modeled after the characters from the Honeymooners. Make way, make way! Will you stop dinging that triangle?
That's so funny. I never made that connection. Of course, I didn't know. Okay, but yeah, that's great. Imitate the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's I mean, I imitated Katharine Hepburn for several things over the years, and you just mimic anybody just to come up with a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's how I got on Sesame Street. Is that I did that workshop that was 2 weeks long, and Richard Hunt was in that workshop as well.
Right.
And after 1 week, they let some of the wannabe puppeteers go. And then after the second week, Richard and I and some other people were hired to do this Ed Sullivan special. And then after that, Jim asked Richard and I if we wanted to do Sesame Street. And Richard was all over it immediately, but I said to Jim, "Gosh, this has been fun, but I'm an actress. I want my face to be seen." And he said, "Oh, okay. Well, why don't you just try it?" I think back then the seasons were short. It's varied so much. It's been 6 months. It's been 3 months. But anyway, I agreed to do that for some reason. I guess I thought, well, this is gonna at least be some money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to think about that. And this allowed me to get my own apartment instead of living with this other girl. So it got me on my feet because it was a predictable paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And then but I actually did a play during the first few months of doing Sesame Street. I got cast in this play, and I commuted from Washington, D.C. to the studio because I would do the play at night and then do Sesame Street the next morning. I mean, this was really nuts. I didn't do it for super long, but I remember having to do that and thinking, oh my gosh. But of course, back then I was very young and had a lot of energy. But I wanted to do this play. So anyway, I got sucked in and pulled in, but I don't regret it. It's just been a wonderful thing to be associated with.
I bet.
The most wonderful people, of course, Jim and Frank and the puppeteers and the writers. And you know what I think is the greatest thing is that when I meet somebody and they ask, you know, well, what did you do? And I say, well, I was actually a Muppet performer on Sesame Street. And their eyes light up, you know, like it's a Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a wonderful response to get, you know.
Yeah, I bet.
They just right away, they're just so fascinated. And I've done a lot of, I mean, I've done like 100 plays in my life, but to have, I mean, that the applause is really nice too in live theater. But to see somebody's face light up when you say you've done Sesame Street, it's pretty cool.
I bet, yeah, because that, you know,
very rewarding.
Yeah, because again, you were one of the original Muppet performers for that show, and you all, and the six of you, Jim, Frank, Jerry, Richard, Carol, you all really definitely did shape the early years of the show with the characters you performed. Do you remember the very first ever character that you performed? Was it like a one-shot character or a recurring one, or?
I wish. No. Well, the first things I did were right hands, because that's how you get an idea of how this whole Muppet thing works. So I was Jim's right hand when he did Ernie. I was Frank's right hand when he did Cookie Monster. Those are the two characters. And then, of course, if it was a girl's voice, they would throw that to me in a group number. Because we pre-recorded, as we still do on Sesame Street, all the songs. But we would you know, perform them with all these cables hanging off us. Thank goodness we reinvented the wheel. There used to be cables that went from our headsets down to the floor, and there would be crew members trying to pull them away from our feet so we wouldn't trip and kill ourselves. But when you're attached to another puppeteer, like Jim, who's much taller than me and was just running around the set, I am amazed that I didn't kill myself, you know, by tripping over him or his feet or the cables. And I was wearing those high platform shoes back then too. They were boots that had probably a 6-inch platform glued onto them.
Oh, wow.
So it was hazardous.
Yeah, I was talking to a buddy of mine about this the other day. Puppeteering actually can be hazardous to your health.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can.
It can hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do actually think that your first recurring character, because again, you mentioned that you did like group shots, but I think the first recurring character might have been Prairie Dawn as a generic puppet.
I think it was Betty Lou.
Okay, yeah.
Betty Lou, I puppeteered both of those characters. Betty Lou had pigtails, and Prairie Dawn had that, you know, page boy hairdo.
Yeah.
And I think I tried to make a different voice. It was all just so simplified back then.
Yeah.
So you may be right, but I think it might have been Betty Lou first.
Okay, yeah.
Who was mostly in books. But
I was just about to say, yeah, I mostly remember Betty. I saw Betty Lou occasionally on the show when I was a kid, but not a lot.
She disappeared, yeah.
Yeah.
She sort of segued into Roxy Marie, which was another puppet that I did.
That is my favorite character that you have ever done is Roxy Marie.
That I have never done?
That you have ever done is Roxy Marie.
Done.
That is my favorite.
I really was really fond of her too. I must thank you for saying that, but I enjoyed doing her so much, and I love that relationship between Roxy and her Uncle Biff, you know, because she was a little bit smarter than he was. You know, he was just a simple guy.
Yeah, I think that was always the case with Biff and Sully too, is that Sully, even though he never spoke, he was a lot smarter than Biff was, and it was so easy to tell. Cause like I remember, hey Sully, they're about to do that song you like. Why don't you tell them you know that song? And then Richard's got Sully's mouth open like he's ready to talk, and Biff's like, hey, Sully knows that song.
They were great bits.
Yeah.
But I liked her because well, you know, in the creating of the character, I said, why don't we put glasses on her? We don't have one puppet. And there are people and children who wear glasses. So they put the glasses on her, and and the little backpack, where her books were.
Mm-hmm.
I think I thought that was a good idea too. And then all of a sudden, you just end up with this character who likes science, and it was just great because we hadn't done that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a need. You got to have some brainiac kids who the brainiac children can identify with, and say, hey, it's cool to be a brainiac, because sometimes people make fun of children who are very smart, and that's terrible
I totally agree.
Yeah. So thank you. I really like her too. I wish somebody would take over that role, but these days, from what I've seen of the show, it was all great at that time, just coming in with different looks and all that. But now it's pretty clear that they are creating puppets that have a purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you still watch the show? Or
all the time.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well,
I never grew up.
Well, thank goodness. You don't want to ever grow up, not inside yourself. That's great.
In the words of Avril Lavigne, here's to never growing up.
That's true. I would say, I think it's probably absolutely right to do at this time in 2022. Because the puppets were all multicolored, so that you wouldn't say, oh, that's a black child, or that's a white, or Asian. But now they are hiring puppeteers who are honestly whatever race is called for, and they've created puppets that look just like if they're Asian or African American, whatever. And I think they're filling a need for children. So even though a lot of the comedy, I think, has been lost a little bit when everything is sort of teaching in a way. I don't know. That's not fair. I don't watch the show all the time, but you probably are never going to see, a pink puppet again. It's like, or a green puppet, except as in anything Muppet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you diced the one clip that I saw, which I thought was just great, and it might have been Noel, I don't know, but they had a black father and a young black son, and the son was going to get his hair cut at the barber shop.
Yeah, I did see that.
Oh my gosh, I thought that was so wonderful. Because that's an experience, and the barber shop is sort of a known meeting place for the African American world. And I thought that was just brilliant that they wrote that sketch.
Yeah, they're really doing some good stuff with that now.
They are, but the show has just changed so much that's why they don't need a Roxy Marie. Do you know what I mean? That's really right.
Yeah, but it's too bad because they've brought back Biff and Sully in recent episodes.
Did they?
Yeah, Matt is doing Biff as you'd expect because he's doing mostly Jerry's characters, and David because I know that after Richard passed, David took on
David Redman.
Yeah, David Redman took on Sully because he worked very closely with Richard, so he knew how he worked.
Of course,
So it's really nice to see Biff and Sully back. They actually, a couple of years ago, there was an episode where they actually played a pretty big part.
Really?
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah, so it's nice that they're bringing back all the classic characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of classic characters, with Prairie Dawn, like as I said, she was just like for a while just a generic puppet, and then became a character who had an actual personality. Of course, was the piano player for the pageants, which I love. I love those pageants.
I did too. I thought it was so funny because she is the smallest puppet, and she was female, and she just told those guys what to do, and play the piano badly. I love Prairie. I don't think you're going to see much of Prairie on the show anymore. I know at one point, we've had lots of executive producers over the years, as you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And they thought she was too bossy, is what I heard. which is too bad. I like to think of it as being sure of yourself, not bossy.
Yeah. Well,
But
she definitely was very, very sure of herself. But I kind of understand where the bossy thing comes from, because like one of my very favorite Prairie things ever was from the special with Jon Stewart, Elmo Palooza, where they were locked in Jon Stewart's dressing room, and she's freaking the hell out.
Yeah, I haven't seen that show in so long. I'd have to go back and look at it to remember.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, and I've talked to Kevin Clash about this a lot. He agrees. He just thinks Prairie was one of the funniest characters ever because of the juxtaposition of her size and yet how enormously secure of herself she was. And I think they just thought that she would teach children bad habits. I don't think so. I really disagree with that, but I know that's sort of what happened.
Well, Lou Berger told me that his very favorite line that he ever wrote was actually for Prairie, and it was in the New Year's Eve special, but it almost was cut. It was, I'm not really a monster, but it is a job in communications.
Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that or knew that. That is wild.
Yeah. He basically had mentioned that you had really liked saying that line so much, and then you would come up to him and said, "We can't cut that line out. I love saying that." And he was like, "I'll see what I can do." Talks to Nina, Elias, and it's like, "All right, we'll leave it in." And it does kind of show that little I don't want to say bossy.
Well, she was.
What's the word I'm looking for? She sure of herself.
Yeah, very confident. That's all. She was born confident, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's where the humor to me was, that this little pipsqueak girl, my backstory for her was that, she started just plunking these tunes out on the piano, and then she started, doing the lights and the set design and started producing. And that one day she would run the network, that was her trajectory coming from this 7-year-old girl.
And then became a film director. I'm singing in the rain.
That is one of my favorite bits ever. You know all of this stuff. That is one of the, I think, funniest. It was written so well, for God's sakes,
It really was.
But that was the first beginning where somebody had the idea to make her the director.
So how did Zoe come about? Because Zoe became a pretty popular character, like almost instantly.
I had been out of Sesame Street for quite some time, and I was, doing acting jobs and stuff. And I got a phone call from what was the newest executive producer. He was Michael Lohman, if you know where he goes in the line.
Yep.
And he said, "Fran, we want you to come back, and we want you to come up with a best friend of Elmo's, who's a girl. And we want her to be 3 years old, or, thereabouts, preschool. And we want her to be, Elmo's buddy." So I'm like, oh, and I said, okay. And so I went around to nursery schools and stuff like that, trying to pick up something, get inspired. All I had was a picture of this wide-mouthed orange puppet. And that's all they kind of gave me. So I had to work with the puppet in a mirror and kind of try to figure out what her voice would sound like and, what her interests were. Talk about creating something from scratch. It wasn't even a puppet yet. And then they built the puppet, and then Kevin and I did improvisations, because that's really how you find out who a character is just you're thrust in something, a situation, and you start talking. And so we got some ideas, and the writers got some ideas from that. But I'll tell you, when I hit the set, the sound stage, for the first time with Zoe, I was so nervous because she really wasn't fully formed in my head. And they gave me this song to sing called I'm Proud. And what they seemed to want was a high energy, the opposite of Prairie Dawn, who is, very sweet, all that stuff. They wanted her to be, to have gumption and all this stuff. So I pushed really hard and I kept my mouth like Carol Channing really wide. And I finished that song and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so not right. I have to just drop down my own energy level. She's got to come out of me as opposed to me layering this puppet onto my persona. So it got better after that. But those first few times performing her were horrible, I think. Really horrible.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's because I didn't know who she was. It was really, and then I think I took to heart the spunkiness too much. So I relaxed and then the puppet relaxed. And, I would say within a few weeks, she was, much more of a person.
Okay. One of the things I always really liked about Zoe was that in every episode she was in, like if she was really, really excited about it, everyone was always a good sport. Or if somebody was doing something and she was around it, she was always really excited about it and they'd kind of let her help out or something. Because I think there was one episode where she wrote a story about Gina. I think that's the one. What are some of your favorite Zoe episodes?
Oh gosh. Well, I loved the Zoe Mobile. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That little
car.
Man. I thought it was such a hoot because I had to crawl into this thing, lie on my back, keep her up. But I thought it was such a cute idea. And well, the show that always comes to mind is she was very particular about, this was her thing. This Zoe Mobile was precious. She didn't want anything to happen to it. And they wrote a show where Telly and Baby Bear take a ride in Zoe's Zoe Mobile. And Zoe does say, okay, finally, because they beg her, please let us do that. She gives them the Zoe Mobile and then they crash it.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was awful. And I'll tell you what, I was crying while puppeteering because the two characters were really apologetic and oh my God, and we'll get it fixed for you. But I, as a performer, was literally, I was crying because it meant so much to Zoe that her Zoe Mobile was now, messed up.
Wow, you really felt it. Wow.
Oh yeah, I did. I was just in it, I just was in it. But that was a nice script because it gave her something to do, and it was what happens. Kids have toys, and some kid picks it up and smashes it on the floor, and then the lesson is get over it and forgive, the kids and accept their apology. So I don't know. There were tons of other things, I really enjoyed doing her. Sometimes in the car when I'm driving, I'll just let her out,
You're in your own personal Zoe Mobile.
You're right. I never thought of it that way. But, I miss those characters. I miss the characters. I really do. Because they are a part of me. We're channeling them. But, so I bring her home.
Lately, Zoe's actually had kind of a popularity on the internet. I don't know if you have seen that with Rocco, with Elmo hating on Rocco.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was all over the place.
I did not see that coming at all.
I didn't either. That was with with Rocco, right? It was, the whole Rocco thing.
Yeah, Elmo being like, he's a rock. Yeah.
Well, Kevin was terrific doing those bits.
Yeah.
And, she just mindlessly teased him because she knew he was just a rock, but she could needle.
Yeah, she just had a very wild imagination that
That's
could
right.
go all
Right.
over the place. And Elmo, of course, he himself also had a wild imagination, but he didn't make believe that things were that inanimate objects were real. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think one of the few times I saw Elmo really, really take his imagination to a new level would be in the Elmo's World segments where he's like, "Oh, look, Dorothy's imagining Elmo doing this."
Yes.
I'm thinking to myself, how can you tell? He's a she's a fish. She just swims everywhere.
Exactly.
She's probably just ignoring him.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't give a crap about anything he's saying. So you were talking about feeling emotional during that episode where Telly and Baby Bear accidentally destroy the Zoe Mobile, or maybe they just wanted to get rid of it. I'm kidding.
No, I think they thought it was cool, and
yeah.
they didn't have a vehicle that took them around Sesame Street.
Well, Telly just had his pogo stick, but that didn't go very far.
No, it's a lot of work.
Exactly. Was there ever a moment during your time on Sesame Street, because that show has handled some really heavy stuff, like Mr. Hooper's death, Hooper's store catching on fire, Miles getting adopted. These are all serious things, and they handle them very, very well. Since we just had a hurricane here in Nova Scotia, the hurricane episode, of course, is one that has been coming to mind lately. Was there ever a time where you were on the set of Sesame Street and you were like, "Oh, wow, I just feel so proud to be a part of this show"?
Oh, absolutely. And I've spoken about this before, so it's not original, but yes, when we're performing like in a big number or a scene, and we all have to get our puppets' heads in the shot. We are lying all over each other, whatever we have to do, legs on top of legs, whatever. We're like a moving blob on the soundstage floor. So we were doing a show. I think it was with a guest, celebrity guest, but I can't remember. But I know in between takes or something, I think it was a celebrity, because there were a lot of people from the production office who came to watch. Usually they don't, but if it's a celebrity, everybody's, hey, let's see what they're doing, So I was lying there and I looked around me, and there was like every race, every gender, it was just this world of the show. Sesame Street was so open to hiring anybody who could do the job and do it well. And I thought, here we all are working on the same show. And how wonderful is this? If only the rest of the world could be like this, where you are hired simply because you can do the job, regardless of who you are or what religion you are or anything like that. And I was pretty overwhelmed by that. I thought, not only am I lucky to be in this very accepting world, but this is an ideal situation, which I don't know that happens many times all over the world. If you're in a situation with people who don't come from where you come from, or, are so dissimilar, and yet they're all here together to make the best show they can. So that was a pretty profound moment for me.
I bet. I remember you had told me once about a celebrity story that you had from doing Sesame Street, which was with Christopher Reeve.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah, that was a tough one. Well, it was obviously after his horse accident. Right. And it was great because it was a show that really was Zoe with him. And so we were told, first of all, we were told, don't touch him, don't do this, don't do that. They had to make the studio colder. He had all these needs because he couldn't do anything himself except to blow into a straw that ambulated his very special wheelchair. But of course, he came onto the set and made everybody feel comfortable immediately by cracking some joke or something. but it was pretty tragic, seeing this beautiful young man so compromised. So, so anyway, he was great. His son was there. And at one point, because Zoe was, talking to him and everything. And I said, would it be okay if I put Zoe in your lap? Because it's going to look so cute. And it's probably the normal thing that would happen. And he said, oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, yeah. So I was glad I asked that, because I then, put her in the right position, and it was much more, I guess you could say intimate, but personal. But that, I'll always remember that show, and how great he was, and brave,
Yeah.
really brave to do that.
Yeah, I was watching the Muppet Show, his episode of the Muppet Show, and this was, of course, before that happened. And my dad walks by, and he's watching it, and he's like, "It's really sad to see him like that when you just think about what happened afterwards."
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, he played Superman, for God's sakes.
Yeah, that's what makes it even more sad.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then his wife died of lung cancer, and she wasn't even a smoker.
Yeah.
So that poor little boy, both his parents died within, I don't know, 6 years or something.
Yeah, that's tough. I know someone who had that happen to her, losing both of her parents before graduating high school. So.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So moving on from that, let's talk about another character that you did, who is another favorite of mine that you did, Little Bird.
Oh yeah!
I love that character. I just love how Oh yeah, because I love how. First of all, he's cute.
Yeah, the bird is cute, right?
Just a simple-looking, cute puppet who was so interactive too. Because I remember the Imagination game. Okay, so basically, he said to the viewer, "Close your eyes," and then there's just this dark background. So it's like, okay, what we're going to imagine now is we're going to imagine a dog barking. I think that was what it was, a dog barking.
Possibly, yeah.
And then you hear the sound of the dog barking, and then it's like, okay, open your eyes again. All right, let's close them up again. Okay, now let's imagine, I think it was a fire truck, and so you hear the sound of it. It's like, okay, open your eyes. All right, now let's do one more. Okay, this time let's imagine a monster. And so, as with typical Muppet gags, eyes are open and there's Harry behind him.
Right. I don't remember that, but it sounds like a cute idea.
Yeah, it was pretty cute. I loved Little Bird. I really do.
Oh gosh, thanks so much. I don't even know that he was on for very long, but.
I saw him a lot in books too. Like I have a copy, I think I might have it in this room actually, of a book called Big Bird and Little Bird's Big and Little Book.
Oh, that sounds sweet.
Yeah, it's just them talking about Big Bird likes big things, Little Bird likes small things, because he can not reach big things as well as Big Bird can. Yeah, it was their friendship definitely was a sweet thing.
Yeah, and Carol drew this darling picture of Big Bird and Little Bird together. He was a terrific artist and all that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I cannot find it. I moved, and I have a feeling a couple of boxes stayed on the truck, because every time I go look for something, I go, gosh, it's not here. And that was really a shame to lose, because it had, meant a lot to me, but I don't seem to have it. But he was always drawing things like that, just to make a little personal connection. It was very, very nice.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Polly Darton. What were some of your favorite Polly Darton songs?
Oh, gosh, I did.
Because they were really, really clever.
I'm sure they were. Yeah. I don't remember.
I think one of the only ones that I remember that was an actual Dolly Parton parody was Counting 1, 2, 5 instead of Working 9.
Oh, yes, of course. I don't remember that, but now that you said it, I remember it. Yeah.
Okay.
There have been so many bits over the years, these sketches that even when I see them, I go, I don't remember that, You
Okay.
just do so many things like that over a
Mhm.
lifetime. So I don't think it's unusual that one has no memory for it because there's just too many of them.
Okay. What about Wanda Cousteau? Do you remember that character?
Not really. I do
Okay.
remember the puppet.
Yeah. I did actually want to ask you about that puppet. It was a fish out of water who had like a helmet to explore air
Exactly.
that was full of water. How is that done that the helmet was full of water? Do you remember?
It wasn't full of water.
Okay. That's
They must have done something and put the water in afterwards.
okay.
Because I had my hand in a plastic ball,
Mhm.
but
Maybe it was layered or something.
that's right, in post or something like that.
Okay.
But my hand was not wet.
Okay.
But I don't know what happened to that character. In the lounge, the Muppet Lounge, we used to have pictures. I don't know if they're still there, called the Dead Puppet
The Dead
Society.
Muppet Society, yeah.
And it was all these characters that had been on for a little bit of time or a little longer or whatever, 8 by 10s of them. And there were quite a few characters that we all did that just didn't succeed or they couldn't write for them, but it seemed like a good idea in the beginning.
Mhm.
But she was one of them. I barely remember doing more, a handful of shows,
Okay.
with Wanda.
Mm-hmm. There was one character that a couple of people were actually wondering about that you did, Mrs. Crustworthy, and
Oh, I love Mrs.
yeah,
Crustworthy.
and I understand that that was based on someone that you knew.
It was, again, you arrived at the set and there's this puppet, and she looked like a church lady to me, at least when I was a child. There were women who went to church, and I think it still exists, and they have a nice hat on, and they have gloves and a pocketbook, and it's a I think that's been lost quite a bit. People are very casual now when they go to church. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time, when I was going to church, there was this woman who was sort of like a pseudo grandmother to me. And her name was Emma Crook. And she was really a friend of our family, she and her husband. But
Aw.
Emma, I looked at Mrs. Crestworthy and I said, that just looks like Emma. And but now then I came up with a voice and really a personality that was not hers. But I just looked at her, and this was all about a toaster. She got her name because she loves toast. And she took this toaster into Maria to fix the toaster. And I guess they liked what I did with the character, because then anytime they needed in anything Muppet, they threw in Mrs. Crustworthy. But she sort of talked like that. And she sort of, she had loose teeth, because you wore false teeth in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But really, she sounded drunk, I think. But she wasn't drunk.
That probably is what she does when Sesame Street's not filming. Goes to bars.
Probably.
Mhm.
Sits very sadly in a saloon, smoking a cigarette.
To any of you Sesame Street watchers out there, I'm sorry if I'm ruining your childhood.
Oh dear.
But with what you were saying about going to church and stuff like that, very casual. I went to a play a couple of years ago with my grandfather, and he's seeing all of these people who are dressed very casually, and he's like, and I was talking to Norman Stiles about this not too long ago, because Norman and I are very, very close, and
Good.
he's the one who got me in touch with Lou, because they're still friends.
Of course.
And
Wonderful.
my grandfather's looking at everyone, and he's like, don't you have to dress up when you go to theater? I mean, like, I'm going to see Simple Plan and the Offspring in a couple of weeks, and I'm just going to wear my Simple Plan t-shirt and just show up looking like a dweeb. So
There used to be more respect, I think, for the theater, because I remember going to the theater in New York, and people would dress up.
Yeah.
They not only would wear nice clothes. They would wear elegant clothes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fancy, like evening wear. And now I think it's really sad. Now people are in jeans and t-shirts, and it's happening in church too, which I just find that awful. I really do. It's there's a, you know, there's some, it's like if you go to a funeral, you don't wear cutoffs. You know,
Yeah.
there's certain attire for certain things in life. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a respect for the art form, a respect for the performers. Uh, you know, same thing with church. I mean, that was
Yeah.
crazy when I first saw people coming in beach clothes, you know?
Yeah, I remember on an episode of Judge Judy. I'm a Judge Judy watcher, and she's like, "Who is this here? That's my witness. Any reason he chose to wear beach attire to come to court today?" That was actually my first ever voiceover gig. I was working on a kids show
Very
last
good.
year. Last year I
Very good.
worked. Thank you. Last year I worked on my buddy's kids show, and they had an animated character that was a ghost, and
She's
I
easy to satire, you
yeah,
know,
and
with the
and
accent and her
yeah.
demeanor. Yeah.
Is not an answer. Yeah. The director of the show asked the production assistants, can somebody just read the lines for this ghost character, and then we'll have someone edit it in post. And I'm thinking, and I was like, I'll do it because I like to imitate stuff. I can do a ghost voice. I
Yes.
so so I read the script, and then I thought, okay, I want to do this character on the show. So I looked at the director and the producer. I was like, I want to do this character on the show. Not just when you time it. I want to do this character on the show. They talked about it and they mic'd me so I could do it live. And the director says, okay, James, just say something in the mic. I went, is not an answer. And they're like, do that. I'm like, no, I'm not doing Judge Judy to do this character.
Oh God, that's funny.
Yeah,
Wow.
but that's what it ended up sounding like, a ghost with a Brooklyn accent that couldn't really scare people that much other than just with her accent. But they don't keep me here because I'm gorgeous and 5'10", although I am.
I see many careers ahead for you.
Thank you.
That was very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I
So,
think we're reaching time where I've got to go. Do you have
okay.
anything else that you really want to ask?
Yeah, I did want to ask a little bit about Muppet Show and the Jim Henson Hour. What was it like to? And I also do have a fan question in here. I'll be quick with them.
Okay.
So, with the Muppet Show, what was it like to do that in London? Because you only just did like a couple of episodes.
Right. Listen, if my life had been a little bit different then, and my decision making perhaps a little better, I would have loved to spend 5 years in London, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I was just doing other stuff. I think I started doing television. I might have been out in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I came in and I only did maybe 3 or 4 shows. I don't remember. The
Yeah.
only reason I know is I still get a residual for like 10 cents or something for the shows that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I did the Charles Aznavour show, the Paul Williams show. And they had a really terrific female puppeteer that they had found, who was Aaron Oscar. Do you know that name?
Who
Okay.
sadly passed away.
Oh, yeah, horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a good friend of mine too. So it was great for her. She got to do all those shows.
Okay. Yeah. And you also go ahead.
No, I don't even know what I was going to say.
Okay,
No.
and you also did the Jim Henson Hour, which was kind of. I was talking to Mark Saltzman a while ago, who wrote for that show, and he was saying it was we agreed with it. It was a little bit like rebooting the Muppet Show, kind of. And you got to do Zondra in that, and you did that in Canada. What was that show like?
That was. I mean, I love that show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was the first puppet that I did, and then I did Vicki.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I forgot about Vicki.
She was like well, the assistant to the assistant to the assistant. You know, she was always taking notes and doing things, kind of like a stage manager, I guess. It was a tough show to do. The guys are brutal in it. If you've got a scene and they've got the camera on tight, you have just got to stand your ground, because they'll just push my hand right out of the way, you know. I mean, it's just, they don't mean to, but, I just had to really stand there and fight for my position to stay where I was. It was a fun show to work on. I enjoyed doing that show.
Yeah.
And again, I had been away from the show for a while. They just always pick up the phone and call me if I'm, out acting, if they needed a female. And, if it was something I could do, I did. And I came back in. But I love being in Toronto. I love being on location.
Yeah, that's
really
so
love
much
that.
fun. That really is a lot of fun.
I mean, as an actress, I was always, yay, I'm going to Banff. That was something. I did a movie of the week 100 years ago.
Oh, cool.
With, oh God, Goldie Hawn's, not quite a husband, but long-term relationship. Oh gosh, your fans will know.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure somebody will chime in.
They've been together for
comments, yeah.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the lead in it, and I played his boss or something like that. But we shot it up in Banff, and it was just really pretty. And when I did What About Bob, we were.
I was just about to ask you about What About Bob, because that is one that I have introduced many of my friends to.
Yeah.
A lot of them get a kick out of it.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, one of my really good friends gets a big kick out of it. I went to Wolfville, which is in the Annapolis Valley here. And I got in touch with my friend Emily, and I texted her, "Hey, are you around?" And because she lives out there, and she's like, "Yeah, I am." So we spent the day together, and there's like this comic book. There's a store for nerds there, and they got DVDs, comic books, CDs, all kinds of nerdy stuff there. And there was a copy of What About Bob. I was like, "Emily, you need to watch this." And so she bought a copy of it. I don't know if she's seen it yet. Emily,
funny.
if you have, leave a comment.
It is. It's a funny movie. Oh my god.
So funny. Like one of my very best friends in high school used to get so annoyed when I would do this. But we would be having lunch, and I would just go, imitating Bob in that scene. She's like, "Shut up." After like 5 minutes of me doing that. So every time I watch that scene, I text her. Her name's Ashley. And I'm like, "Hey, Ashley, want to be annoyed?"
That's great.
Yeah. So what was Bill Murray like when you worked with him?
Oh my God.
Because he's so funny.
He was interesting.
Okay. That's a good way to describe him.
I don't think I need to talk about him. He's a character. He's a real character in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I bet.
So, but he was fun to be around. Though I will say this, I guess he's been in the business long enough that when they call you to the set, usually, and if it was me, I immediately go to the set. Yeah. But Bill would not. They'd have to knock on his trailer door. Bill, we need you, Bill. I'm coming, but he wouldn't come out. So the crew had T-shirts made. And so instead of it being What About Bob, it was Where's Bill? They put on all these T-shirts. I wish I'd gotten one.
Oh man, that would be worth a lot of money on eBay one day, I bet.
You're right. He was naughty, in that he did not... it's a little bit of a power thing to not.
And plus, you got to get bossed around a lot by Frank Oz in that film. So
it was actually really nice working with Frank.
I bet.
He's a very good director. He is. He lets you do what you want to a certain extent, but to be free. And I auditioned for that. He certainly had to come in, but he wanted to make it clear to me and to whoever else was sitting behind the desk for the auditionees that, they had to like me or not like me. So I just want to make that clear. It isn't because he knew me. There were other women who came in and read for this role.
Before we go into the fan question, I just got one last thing for you about movies. You got to perform in The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland.
Yes.
Was that now doing the Sesame Street characters for a movie? Obviously, you're doing the same characters, so it feels the same, but it's a different set and a different kind of environment. Did it feel any different for you?
Well, yeah, because it's with television, it moves so fast, but with film, it's so slow, and you do
Oh yeah.
a lot more takes than we ever do on Sesame Street, because you don't have the time on television to get it perfect or whatever. Boy, I mean, I enjoyed doing it. It was fun, and I loved what they gave Zoe to do. You know, it's nice to not just be a character in a movie or a bit, but to have, you know, an intention and a problem and a real situation where she borrowed something that was Elmo's, and the worst thing that could happen happened to her, and that it blew away. It's sort of similar to the Zoe Mobile being crashed.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this happens though. Kids break things, and I'm sure Elmo got mad at her, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I haven't seen that in a long time.
It's so cute. Such a cute movie. All right, so let's wrap it up with a fan question. This one comes from my sister, actually, Eliza.
Okay.
And she wants to know, you performed one of the only main old school female Sesame Street characters. Eliza, what do you think of as old school? You're making me feel old here.
Well, that's what they're sold as old school. You know, when you buy that. Yeah.
Has anyone ever told you that you made an impact on their childhood?
Yeah, I guess quite a few, actually. I've gotten letters, of course, and fan mail, and yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that, you know, I'm a certain age now, and the show is 50, what is it, 52 years old now, 53?
It's going to be 53 in November.
Okay. So, you know, if I meet somebody who's younger than I am, they grew up, you know, on the show. So it's a very nice feeling that they watched what I did for a long, long time ago, and they, you know, just say this. I watch the show all the time, and it was, you know, a lot of people in their 30s and now I guess 40s. Is that right? Yeah. It had a profound effect on them. And if they're, you know, I'm always disappointed to find somebody, even in my extended family, who doesn't watch Sesame Street. You know, they let the kids watch Rugrats or something like that instead of Sesame Street. And I'm thinking, wow, they're missing so much.
Yeah, because Rugrats was entertaining, but it wasn't educational.
Absolutely. And I always detested Barney. I'm sorry, Barney fans, because I thought it was just very silly, and, you know, it was a kids show, but what we were doing seemed so much deeper and more important.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable.
But sure, it's really nice to have somebody say, your show really impacted my life tremendously.
Yeah,
you know, you can't really feel it, but you get it. You know.
Yeah. Well, Fran, thank you very much for coming on episode number 50, which I still can't believe that
feels very special that I'm on the 50th show.
Well, is there anything else you want to say?
No, I guess I just deeply appreciate everybody who's still watching it. And, you know, it was a great ride for me. It was a show that was hard to leave because it's my extended family, and we all feel like that about each other, which is very nice. I'm still in contact with a lot of people that used to be on the show.
And of course,
it's a special thing.
And of course, you made a little cameo on the 50th anniversary special too.
I did indeed. Well, they said, we want you to come up. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I certainly don't want to puppeteer, because those puppets are now performed by Jen Barnhart and Stephanie DeBruzzo, and I don't think that's fair to them. They have assumed these characters. And I also just didn't want to get on the floor again. You know?
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so they said, great. Well, then you want to just be a human on the show? And I said, great. So, yeah, I love coming back when they need me. But I just think that's over, you know, over next for me. So, well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you as well. Yes. And to all you listeners out there, since this is the 50th show, I have to say thank you all for continuing to listen every time I post something new. When I get the chance, because I am very, very busy now. And also a big thank you to Mike Peterson, Kevin Carlson, Ron Doucette, Tim Gosley, Pat Fraley, Patrick Bristow, Matt Hill, Bob Bergen, Joe Matthew, Ivy Austin, Alan Troutman, Marty Robinson, Chris Surf, Lewis Henry Mitchell, Lee Toker, who else? I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of people. Stuart Pankin, Jim Benton, Paul Rudolph, Tom Spawn, Cheryl Blaylock, Noel McNeil, who else? Ed Valentine, Katie Lee, Ricky Boyd, Emily Kingsley, Leslie Carrara Rudolph, the cast of Lazytown. I won't go into that because that's 5 people. Gordon Robertson, Norman Stiles, Juju Papaye, Lou Berger, Terry Hardin, Greg Berg, Rick Lyon, Justin Shankaro, Terry Angus, Phil Proctor, Austin Pendleton, Paul McGinnis, Ozzy Alfonso, Daniel Ross, Billy Barkers, Laura Faye Smith, Judy Levito, Dan Gutman, Mark Saltzman, Bruce Lanoyle, Pam Arciero, and of course, finally, Fran Brill. Sorry that was so long. Thank you all. Thank you. I was worried I was going to screw that up and forget like 15 people.
My gosh, I would have had those names written down.
I thought I was going to. I didn't know I was going to do that. I think that deserves some applause.
Well, good for you. Yes.
Thank you to everyone who came on Nostalgia Talk over the last 2 years, and I can promise you there is more to come. There is a ton more to come, and I cannot wait to share it with all of you. So until then, peace!